Hello, I'm Tom Wilkinson, and welcome to the Thinking in English podcast, a podcast aimed at intermediate to advanced level English learners. In this episode, I'm going to talk about a big change in my life, explain why I've not uploaded many episodes recently, and discuss the process of moving to a new country during the middle of a pandemic. But first, why not follow the Thinking in English Instagram page, Thinking in English podcast, or the link is in the description. And you definitely should look at our blog, thinkinginenglish.blog, for all the transcripts and bonus content. You've probably noticed that, for the last few weeks at least, I have released very few podcasts. So, where have I been? What have I been doing? Why have I been so busy in June and July? And what is the future of the Thinking in English podcast? Well, by the end of this episode, I think you'll know the answers to all of these questions. The title of the episode actually probably gives you a big clue to the reason there have been no episodes recently. I moved country. Right now, I am sitting in my new apartment in the suburbs of Tokyo, Japan, drinking green tea and trying to remember the vocabulary I need to open a bank account using Japanese. Moving countries is always a stressful process, but moving to Japan during the pandemic was incredibly difficult and full of issues and delays. In fact, one of the factors or reasons that influenced me to start thinking in English was that I couldn't travel to Japan and I was stuck in my hometown. It's not an understatement to say that I had been waiting for nearly a year to travel. So this episode, I guess it's a bit of a different type of episode compared to the normal ones you're used to. But I think it's useful for you to know where I've been and what I've been doing and why I've not been uploading any episodes. And also learn something about my life, I guess. So I'll start by explaining why I'm in Japan. And then I'll talk about how I managed to move across the world while most people are still banned from entering the country. As well as teaching online, I'm also a research student at one of the top universities in Japan. Studying is something I have always enjoyed, and back in 2019, I was a student in London, and I wanted to study more. Master's degrees in the UK are only 1 year long, and it's a very fast and very intense process, and I didn't feel like I had enough time to really learn everything that I wanted. So I was searching for opportunities to carry on studying, and especially to carry on studying abroad. So many of my friends and classmates in the UK and also people I've met in other countries, they've all studied in different countries, and they were always telling me about their amazing experiences abroad. So I decided maybe I could apply to a couple of different programs and see what happened. Eventually, after some interviews, essays, tests, and a lot of waiting, I was accepted to 2 different scholarship programs. One of the programs was in Taiwan and one in Japan. Unfortunately, I was very lucky, and the programs actually took place or started at different times. So in November 2019, I moved to Taiwan to study Chinese for 6 months. And I had the intention of moving to Japan in September 2020. But like millions of people around the world, COVID-19 turned my world upside down and ruined most of the plans, if not all of the plans that I had. Instead of fulfilling my dreams and spending the evenings eating sushi in downtown Tokyo, I was forced to return to the village I grew up in and spend most of my time sitting in a small room in rainy England teaching English online and trying to avoid my family and my parents. England was obviously in a lockdown for a lot of the last, 18 months. So it made it even more difficult, as I was not really able to travel to meet my different friends or go to restaurants or even go to the pub and things like that. And by the time that September 2020 came around, it was clear that Japan was still restricting the entry of new immigrants. So I deferred my scholarship and my university admission until April 2021. I kept working 2 different jobs, and I started this podcast. As I just mentioned, Japan, like many countries, has serious immigration restrictions at the moment. And Japan's are actually a lot stricter than a lot of other countries around the world. Due to the 2020 Olympics and rising cases of COVID variants, most foreign nationals are actually banned from traveling to Japan in all circumstances. However, I was unable to defer or postpone my scholarship anymore. And this meant that I had to start studying, but I couldn't travel to Japan. So as a result, for about 3 months, so from April until 3 weeks ago, I studied online from 2 a.m. until 7 a.m., 3 nights a week, taking classes with professors and classmates 10,000 kilometers away from my hometown, and drinking hundreds of cups of tea, trying to stay awake every night. It's not easy studying during the night, especially if you're working and trying to be awake during the daytime. Obviously, it negatively impacts your sleep, but also your health, your thinking, your whole life. After a few weeks, I guess I eventually got used to it, and waking up in the middle of the night became my routine. And I was actually prepared to carry on doing it until the end of the semester. However, on June 20th, so I guess about a month ago, maybe exactly a month ago, depending on when you're listening, I received a phone call from the Japanese embassy in London, informing me that I had been approved for a visa to Japan. I then received more phone calls and emails from the Japanese government and from my university in Japan, telling me that finally I could fly. As my scholarship is provided by the Japanese government, they made a special exemption for people in my situation, allowing us to travel to Japan despite the ban on new immigrants. And I was ecstatic. Finally, after 10 months of waiting, 10 months of being stuck in my boring hometown, I could leave. But when could I leave? When was I flying? I always knew it would be, short notice to travel. I was expecting, it would be less than a month, maybe even 2 weeks. Well, it turns out they only gave me 6 days notice. I had 6 days to organize everything I needed to do before my flight. I had to buy insurance, book COVID tests, travel to London twice for my visa, pack suitcases, buy the last remaining things that I needed, find somewhere to live in Japan, write 4 different assignments for my classes, and other stuff I'm forgetting right now. It would be an understatement to say I was stressed. I've moved countries before. I moved to Japan in 2016, and then back to England in 2018, and then I moved to Taiwan in 2019 and back in 2020. And it's always stressful, right? But only having a few days notice to travel, especially when it's not a vacation. I'm planning on living in Japan for at least 2 years, maybe longer. Having only a few days notice to travel is incredibly, incredibly stressful. I thought I was going to have a mental breakdown at least 3 times. And I flew from London to Tokyo via Paris. So I'm not sure if you've traveled during the pandemic, but airports are very different places compared to a few years ago. Social distancing is required. Everyone is wearing masks. I actually wore 2 masks the whole time. Many of the shops are closed, and there are relatively small number of flights leaving every day. After arriving in Tokyo, I had to wait for a few hours while I was processed by immigration, tested for COVID, and picked up by government officials. In the past, this process has only taken me less than an hour, sometimes even less than 30 minutes to do. But arriving in Tokyo because of the pandemic, it took a lot longer. And after arriving in Japan, of course, I had to quarantine. I was quarantined for 2 weeks in a hotel close to the airport. And this might have been the most difficult part of the experience. I was expecting it to be quite nice and relaxed. I have 2 weeks of just chilling in my room, relaxing, watching TV, reading books. But it wasn't that simple. For 8 days, I was in complete quarantine, complete isolation. I was not allowed to leave my room for exercise. I couldn't go outside to buy snacks at the convenience store. And I struggled a lot with jet lag and with the time difference and with motivation. I was sleeping at strange times. I was sleeping a lot of the daytime, actually, because there was nothing else to do. I had a choice of either sitting at a small desk, laying in my bed, or standing in the bathroom, and that's the only places I had. It wasn't fun, and I definitely wouldn't recommend doing it. But thankfully, I'm free now. I moved into my new apartment last week, and I'm getting ready to restart recording normal podcast episodes. But what is the future of thinking in English? Especially now that I'm in Japan, will I continue recording episodes? Well, the short answer is yes, I'm going to continue. I really enjoy making this podcast, and I have no plans on stopping right now. Actually, if you have any recommendations to improve what I'm doing or any topics you'd like me to talk about, then please DM me on Instagram. I'm also still tutoring online on Cambly, so have a look if you're a member, have a look at the profile and see if you want some lessons with me. And hopefully now you understand my situation a little better. And hopefully you're still listening to the podcast, even though I've not uploaded for a few weeks.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Thinking in English. Please share with your friends, check out our social media links in the description, and send us a message. We really appreciate all of your feedback. And if you have any ideas for topics or future podcast guests or any other learning format, please let us know. And please leave me a rating. We're now on Instagram. I'm sure you've already seen it, but go there, check it out. Lots of good content about vocabulary, pronunciation, and grammar. And Instagram is a great way to contact me. It's Thinking in English Podcast on Instagram, or the link is in the description. Also, all of the transcripts of the podcast are now available on the Thinking in English blog. Vocabulary list, comprehension questions, and all of the articles are there for you to read. That link is also in the description, so please check it out too. Thank you, and see you next time.